Are you the quantum mechanics?
Yes, we are the quantum mechanics.
Also known as the justified ancients of woo-woo.
If you're interested in the paranormal and the high strangeness, we're the podcast for you.
Whether you're a believer, a doubter, or somewhere in between.
I'm Ben.
And I'm Peter.
And we are the Quantum
Mechanics. We are the Quantum Mechanics, and our studio's not quite as hell-like as it was last week, is it?
No, I can wear the same T-shirt for more than 38 minutes.
38 seconds.
38 seconds, yeah.
What have we got today, Ben?
Well, first of all, I wanted to say welcome if you're a refugee from a certain Australian-voiced paranormal podcast.
Is that all finished now, is it?
No, but
on the decline.
It's different voices on there, and I had a couple of messages saying that we found you instead, so if that is you, thank you very much. What we're going to be doing today, so you know how quite often when we get into conversations about the stories that we tell on the show, I always say there's something else there, and we agree that sometimes an alien abduction feels like a fairy encounter, right. And it's pulling the exactly. yeah. I've been reading Patrick Harper from 1994. It's called Daemonic Reality, A Field Guide to the Other World. Not demonic, daemonic, that will come out in there. But he makes this really interesting point that our culture so far, really genuinely in the West, it is only a small subculture of people who take these things seriously like us, and it really does cover the gamut. So flying saucers, fairies, I think flying saucers probably maybe a little bit more since 1994 because of what's been happening in Congress. Yeah. But Yetis, black dogs, weeping statues, all of that stuff. A lot of people say, is it real? And we have this debate about alien craft the other day. Is it real? Like a bus, a boot, or a rock? Is it made up? A dream, a hallucination, or a lie? All of those things could be true, because a dream or an hallucination, it's sort of not the truth, but you don't, perhaps you're not doing it on purpose. A lie is different.
I thought you were like in the middle of a cognitive test then. Boot, bus.
Playing Monopoly. But Harper says there's a third thing. Every culture in human history has known about the third thing and had 100 names for it. But we, as modern, rational, sort of not looking back at the past, but defining ourselves with technology, we've managed to lose the vocabulary for it. And he calls the inhabitants of that third category daemons. As I say, not demons. We'll get onto how that word got poisoned. Okay. And now I'm going to talk about some of these stories and the very ordinary people that ran into them, and talk about why it is likely to be this third thing, and try and pull some threads together. Some of these stories are almost certainly true. Some are almost certainly hoaxes.
Right.
And what Harper says is that he thinks the hoaxes matter just as much as the true stories, perhaps even more. So let's just go back, and this is a familiar story to a number of you, but he uses it in quite a clever way. Alan Godfrey from Todmorden. Do you remember this story?
I might when we get into it.
Okay, so it starts with it's on the 28th of November 1980, and police constable is driving a patrol car up Burnley Road on the edge of Todmorden in the Pennines. And he's looking out for a small herd of cows. That's kind of what he's being called out for. Some cows have escaped. Then along ahead of him on this empty road, he sees a bus. Except it's the wrong time of day for a bus, and it's the wrong shape for a bus. It's a massive light hovering maybe 5 feet above the tarmac.
Right.
Rotating slowly, and it's making the bushes at the roadside tremble like something is, like it's breathing. His radio goes dead. The car goes dead. The car radio goes dead. Constable Alan Godfrey does what any of us would do. He takes out a pen and a clipboard, and in the darkness he draws a picture of it.
Right.
Because the next thing he knows, he's parked 100 yards further up the road, the thing is gone, and there's a tear in the sole of his police boot.
It's probing time.
Well, That's what he's hoping
It
does
wasn't
not.
happened, yeah.
There were minutes missing, and he noticed this on the car clock. Somewhere between drawing and parking, a chunk of time had gone. So it could be as much as an hour. It depends on who's telling the story and repeating it after him.
Can I just stop you at this point, just because there's something very weird going on here? I have, I said the other week that when I do a book, I need 2 weeks. I need like a week to read it, and then I can kind of digest it and write the ep. So I've been working on my episode for next week. So I've been reading a book, and my episode for next week is about police encounters with UFOs, and not the one that you've just described, because the cows thing I think would have come up, but it's a book that's a compilation of police encounters with UFOs, very similar to what you've just described. How weird is that? I mean, I know we do the podcast and we're going to cross over on stuff, but it's interesting. Literally 10 minutes before you came round, I was reading that book.
That is very interesting. I mean, this isn't all about a police officer, but it's the first story. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
well, let's see how many more sort of weirdness between us comes out from these stories.
Did he report it? Because that's a big part of the book.
He reported it.
Yeah, and they blew him off.
No.
Sorry.
Mary loves Dick.
Yeah, exactly.
Mary loves Dick.
No, they didn't. He was hypnotically regressed, and he tried to fill in the missing minutes. Under hypnosis, out came a story. There was a room, there was a big black dog, small robot-like figures, and a tall, bearded, biblical-looking man in white whom Godfrey called Yosef. Now, here is another strange detail. He didn't believe the hypnosis. He stood by what he saw with his own eyes on the road.
Yeah.
Nobody, he said, will convince me that I didn't see that. But the stuff that came up under hypnosis, alien creatures, weird bearded man, he himself held it at arm's length. He knew that there was a difference between the thing that happened to him and the thing in his mind that was produced under pressure. He believes that it was his own internal workings that caused him to think of these things that came out in the hypnosis.
In the hypnosis. So not the original incident, but the hypnosis.
That's right. So,
okay.
And this is the reason this story is brought up is because this is the kind of knife-edge balance that this whole subject sort of relies on, really, and his argument in the book relies on. There's another thing about the Todd Morden case, and it's a kind of coincidence that Harper really keeps going back to. 5 months before his own encounter, Godfrey had been one of the first officers to a genuinely unsolved death. You will know this one. Zygmunt Adamski, the 75-year-old 75-year-old miner, that'd be a bit old, wouldn't it? Yeah. 57-year-old Polish miner who'd vanished and was found 5 days later on top of a coal heap 20 miles from home.
If I remember that story right, there was no kind of coal markings, or his clothes were really immaculate, right?
Yeah, they were done up wrong, but they were completely immaculate, even though it looked like he'd clambered to the top of a pile of coal.
Yeah.
There were strange burn marks on his neck and shoulders that nobody could explain, and that case has never been solved. And the same constable who stood over that body months later would be dragged out of his own timeline into this weirdness, after he sees this bus.
I do know this story, yes. Yeah, it's the Adamski connection that really reminded me, yeah.
And Harper's point really isn't that aliens killed the miner. Harper's point is subtler and a bit stranger. These things cluster. They gather around certain people and certain landscapes, like weather gathers around a mountain. Todd Morden sits in a valley that the locals already know is filled with folklore. There's something called the Gabriel Hounds, which are spectral dogs that you hear but never see. And, of course, it's in the shadow of the Pendle Witch Trials, which is just over the hill.
Yeah.
The uncanny has an address, he says, and it has favourite neighbourhoods, and this is one of them.
What a great phrase. The uncanny has an address.
Yeah.
The other weird thing that's connected to what you're talking about, the story I was reading just before you came around from the book I'm doing, I won't go into too much detail because I might do it next week. It's a police constable who sees a massive cigar-shaped UFO, right? And then in the same night, he sees 2 other different UFOs. And he's never had a UFO sighting or encounter before that or since that.
So a kind of a clustering.
And he kind of he kind of almost logically was going, well, were they connected to the original craft? But when you said clustering, I thought, it could be that, right? Not necessarily connected. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and so that is the one of the arguments in the book.
Right.
To back it up, let me tell you a similar but completely different story. I guess it's got a French accent, this one, because...
You're going to do it in French?
No. The 1st of July, 1965, just after sunrise.
Good morning.
I was pissing by a lavender farm. No, Maurice Mass, who's out in a field in Valençon in Provence. And he hears this whistling sounds. He looks over, thinks it's probably kids. Don't know why he thinks it's kids, but that's what he says he thought.
Right.
He thinks that some kids had taken and parked a strange little vehicle in the field because there, sitting on 6 thin legs with a central pivot, is an object about the size of a small car, shaped like a rugby ball, and a bit egg-shaped.
Yeah.
And he sees 2 figures crouched beside it, examining his lavender plants. And then he realises those are not kids. They are small, they're the size of 8-year-old boys, but they're wearing grey-green suits. And their heads, and this is what Mass really found, I suppose it made him jump inside his own head. Their heads were large and smooth, and in his words, like pumpkins. They had slanted eyes, lipless little mouths, pointed chins, and they were murmuring to each other in a sound that, to us, came across as gurgling.
But would that would be consistent with an alien grey, would you say? Or
it's kind of greyish, yes.
Greyish.
Yeah. Now, he is annoyed. He's not afraid, he's annoyed because it's his field, it's his crop.
Get off my land, in a French accent.
Exactly. But then one of these beings turns, lifts a small rod, which is obviously a device, and points it at him. Now, Maurice cannot move. He's not unconscious. He's fully awake, he's fully aware, and he's standing mid-stride, frozen between the rows of his crop. And these 2 beings finish looking at him, climb calmly back into the egg, look at him one more time through a window in the craft, and then the thing rises up and is gone. And I love that kind of like, they keep turning around
back.
Going, yeah. Look at him. Isn't he weird?
They could have waved.
Now, then, as soon as the craft had gone, he could move again.
Right.
And he went and told the cafe owner in the village, but he left the creatures out of it. He just said that he'd seen the machine. Yeah. He was a grown man and a farmer and was not going to be, as he described it, the local lunatic. But what he couldn't hide, though, was where the object had stood. The ground was changed. It had been compacted, it was damp, and it looked different to the surrounding area. The lavender at that exact spot had died, and for a long time afterwards, nothing would grow there. Investigators came, gendarmes questioned him for hours, and Mass, this is the through line with Godfrey, Mass never made money off it. He never toured with it. He never enjoyed it. He found it distressing.
I got this feeling, though. So Zorgon and his whoever his companion is, going, absolutely stinks in this spaceship. Oh, lavender field. Let's collect a bit of that. That'll freshen it up.
Well,
it's as good an excuse reason as any.
Well, we've encountered people who are making pancakes.
Yeah, exactly.
So, aliens that were making pancakes, so why not?
Yeah, so it was basically aliens wanted an air freshener for their spaceship.
Yeah, exactly. Now, some of the French researchers argued that this was a helicopter, which would mean that Mass had lied about the beings. There's no logged helicopter anywhere near to that field, and everyone who actually came to meet him came away thinking he was a reluctant, credible witness.
Right.
So, if you put that next to each other, the Yorkshire 1980, the Provence 1965, a policeman and a farmer, and notice what they have in common, because Harper is obsessed with the pattern that lies through the sort of the veins of these stories. Both are sober working people with nothing to gain. Both are alone at a threshold hour, sort of, as night is turning into day, the age of dawn. Both encounter a hovering structured object and small beings. Both experience a wound in time or in the body. Missing minutes, a torn boot, paralysis, dead lavender. There's something that affects them, right?
Yeah.
And both are left not with wonder, but the idea that something happened to them that they are reluctant to accept, and it bothers them.
Yeah.
So these are obviously what we call UFO encounters. And you and I, and probably most people, well, certainly me, imagine engineers from another planet. But Harper points out, if you actually read the reports, the aliens make terrible astronauts. Right. They don't behave like explorers.
Yeah.
They potter around in fields. They collect soils. Sometimes, he actually mentions, sometimes it's even pancakes. They paralyze a farmer to look at lavender and then leave. They act, he says, exactly the way other kinds of beings have been reported to act in exactly these landscapes, in exactly these hours for thousands of years. They act like fairies.
Yeah, okay.
We've spoken about fairies before, the fact that you can't think of them as like the Disney idea. They're not little things that you put on a birthday card.
Yeah.
When we talk about the old traditions of the fairies, the good folk, the gentry, they didn't mean anything cute. They meant a race of beings you did not name directly for fear of attracting their attention. These are beings who lived in the hills and the old forts in the space just at the side of our world, who could be generous, but they could be lethal, and who were, above all else, they didn't think like us, and they could cause severe harm to humans.
We ain't talking Tinkerbell.
No, we're not. No. I'll just remind you, we spoke about this term, being fairy struck. That's an Irish term. Sudden paralysis, frozen, missing time.
Yeah.
So this is why I really sort of love this book, because this is exactly what I keep thinking. This idea of the old fairy encounters, even some of the new ones, I think it sort of really depends upon your view of the world as to whether you see these things as aliens or fairies.
Yeah.
I've got another case here, 1954, Como in northern Italy. A man is parking his car in the evening and he encounters a small, glowing, luminous being in a luminous suit who points something at him. It's devised like a torch, and the beam pins him where he stands. Again, he's paralyzed.
Right.
And the man breaks the spell. And the way he does that is he clenches his hands around the iron keys in his pocket. He does it involuntarily. It's not something that he is sort of he doesn't imagine what the outcome will be. But the single most ancient universal defense against fairies in universal folklore is iron. You hang an iron horseshoe over the door to keep the good folk out. And this is a guy in 1954 breaking an alien paralysis with a fistful of keys and not knowing why it worked.
Although, if I'm going to put my skeptic head on,
yes,
the same could be said as a way of getting out of sleep paralysis as well.
Well, you move something that you can move, or try and scream or shout or whatever, and then it can break the cycle of the sleep paralysis. So that is a very good point. Yes, I mean, in this case, he is drawing the similarity between the metal that he's got.
That he's on,
exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is that the ancient ideas seem to flow through and in some way work with an alien encounter.
Yeah.
So if we go to now the Isle of Man and listen to a man called T.C. Commode describing a night he was walking to a party with a friend. The friend stops and says quite casually, "Oh, look, there's fairies." Commode. We all do. We've all done it. We've all done it. Commode looks, and on a patch of flat ground inside a circle of light that had no visible source, there is a crowd. A great crowd of little beings dressed in red, and they're moving, he said, into order like troops drilling, forming up and marching in formation. until his friends struck a wall and shouted, and they blinked out. So he interrupts what's going on. So they've kind of got this privileged vision of these little folk doing whatever it is they're doing. And it's often that we see them in these formations. Sometimes it is in a strict formation like this. Sometimes they're actually doing recognizable dances in a hall, in a fairy hallway. But these little figures forming in ranks inside a circle of light, the author brings up something that comes from Ireland in the 1800s. There's a woman who's 18 years old. It's actually Halloween night. She watches hundreds of little white lights hovering over an old fairy fort across the water. And all at once, she says, they rise up as one and, keeping their formation, sail steadily through the air towards the fort.
A bit of thing to see, wouldn't it?
Well, that sounds to me and to the author like a UFO fleet.
Yeah.
It's a formation of luminous objects performing a coordinated manoeuvre over water. Reported as fairies a century before anyone had said the word flying saucer.
Right.
And absolutely before we've seen all these encounters, the Nimitz case and all of these
or
things.
Phoenix Lights.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So we've got this idea of formation and luminosity.
Yeah.
And again, it's two different interpretations of the same thing. But it's so interesting that the little beings are in that formation and walking around.
Yeah.
But, I'm sort of, I know you know this, but I'm just now pointing my finger at it. She sees something without there being little people there, but it is at a fairy fort. These are the connections he's trying to build here.
Yeah,
this is a place where,
reference.
And it's the fact that this is, again, in the back garden of this particular manifestation. Similar manifestations. The beings change their costume to match the century, and this is something we have spoken about so much about UFOs. They move from airships through to sleek objects, the sport model, all the way through.
We haven't really done it in the connection with fashion, though, in that sense.
Well, no, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
In an age of kings and hills, they're gentry in red coats. That's the point he's making.
Yeah.
In the age of rockets and radar, they're grey men in silver suits stepping out of a disc. It's the same behaviour. Yeah. It's the same after effect, but it's a new wardrobe. But it changes its outfit.
But then again, it's like the bit of that, if it does tie with the craft changing shape, it's that feeling of they've just got it slightly wrong. You know what I mean? Because nobody walks around, well, not many people walk around in a silver outfit. Maybe if they're going to the Met Gala, but you know what I mean? It's like...
In the early 90s, you might have seen me in one going to a rave.
But if they want to try and fit in, which seems like a ridiculous thing, let's stick on a pair of Levi jeans and a
But
t-shirt.
Maybe they don't want to fit in.
Right.
Maybe they don't. But there is an element of disguise there, isn't there? Like in the first case I mentioned, the reason he says it looks like a bus is because it is vaguely disguised as a bus.
Right.
You squint and you think it's a bus. And there are so many cases that we have spoken about that stick out that the craft appears to be disguised as things like a fairground ride.
Right.
We've done the bus. There was one that I recall from a couple of years ago where there's a child in the back of the car and they go past what looks like a filling station all lit up at night in the middle of nowhere. And then when the child turns around to look out of the back window, the filling station is completely gone and there is some kind of silver object standing there. Again, it's the kind of, they've been glamorized. They've been fairy struck in the way of interpretation, not that they've been paralyzed, but they've been glamorized to believe that there is something that they're looking at, which isn't what they're looking at.
But the fashion blending in, it's all a bit Inspector Clouseau, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yes, it's very strange. It's very strange. So John Keel was interested in this. He collected dozens of modern reports of tiny people, like tiny doll-sized people climbing out of small objects. There's a great case of a woman in Seattle in 1965 who woke up paralysed at 2 a.m. and watched a football-sized object float in through her open window. put down 3 little legs, land, a ramp comes down, and 5 or 6 tiny people in tight suits climbed out and repaired their craft right there on her bedroom floor before packing up and flying back out the window.
That's very Batteries Not Included, that Steven Spielberg film. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And Keel's verdict on the whole modern flying saucer thing and these particular encounters, and this is directly from his book, he says they are identical to the fairy and gnome stories of yesteryear. So again, we had those gnome encounter stories. Particularly noteworthy is the one where the children see all the gnomes driving around in small red clown-like cars and coming...
Sorry.
But do you remember they were always...
That was incredible, that story.
They were always seen down by where the water was on this estate.
Yeah.
So again, it points to a particular location where these things happen. And in the past, we have put that down as, well, that's where the small folk live. That's where the fairies live. If you go to Iceland, you have to get special permission to build anything so that you don't build through where those people live, where those folk live. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So again, it's sort of adding credibility to what he's saying about the neighbourhooding. Let's just talk about something that we have touched on before, but he makes a very different point about it. Flatwoods in West Virginia, you know what I'm going to say, I imagine. Right. 12th of September 1952, it's dusk, and a bright object crosses the sky and seems to come down on a hilltop farm. A group looks up, and a woman named Kathleen May, several local boys, and a 17-year-old National Guardsman named Eugene Lemon have one flashlight between them. They climb towards a pulsating red light, and the flashlight beam finds a figure. 10 feet tall, round head, blood red shaped, they said, eyes, and the whole thing is the shape of an ace of spades. A dark body that seemed to end in pleated folds like a skirt, and it hissed, and then it glided towards them. They ran, all of them, screaming down the hill in the dark, and afterwards there was a foul, choking mist, and several of them were sick to their stomachs. That's a big thing with alien encounters and also cryptid encounters. When I did the episode about A Very American Monster, there was that stench that they said smelled like rotting animals, basically.
It's reminded me as well of the Hynek case that the swamp gas one. That creature, similar look, a bit like a djinn.
A bit like a djinn, yes. Yeah. Now, in this book, he gives, he says this is the probable explanation for the Flatwoods monster. A fireball meteor crossed several states that night. That's the object in the sky. Yeah. And that is actually a matter of fact that did happen. A pulsating red light on the hill was likely an aircraft warning beacon. The 10-foot monster with glowing eyes and gliding up to them. Well, he says it's probably a barn owl. A startled barn owl in a tree with its wings spread open, pale face lit up in a wobbling torch beam, hissing at the idiots that woke it up. Right. And the skirt was the foliage below them. The nausea was pure adrenaline. Yeah. And even if that's exactly right, and it might be, something still happened on the hill. 7 people had a genuine, terrifying, life-altering encounter with the other world. The other world just happened to be wearing an owl that night. Harper would say, and of course he would, that's how they come. They come dressed in whatever it is to hand. An owl, a weather balloon, the planet Venus, a hypnagogic dream. The costume is borrowed. So what he's saying is, yes, you can put it down in those terms. You can explain all the elements, but what you can't do is dismiss those people. Yes, you can easily say, oh, you've been completely mistaken. Look, there was a fireball. Look, owls can appear like that if you shine a torch at them. But he's saying that there was a presence of something else there that caused them to feel this way. So that's why I say it's a third thing.
Let me unpick that a little bit. Is he saying, we talked about the costumes and almost the disguises. you could follow a thread that says the owl incident, it's just the ones who are better at their disguise, right?
Yes, although I don't think he's suggesting that it's like a learned skill. I think he's suggesting that...
Is it, yeah, that's my second point. Is it about our interpretation?
It's about our interpretation, but it's also about... So he doesn't actually use the word trickster, but he says this force, whatever it is, and he doesn't know what it is, and, he makes that very clear. It did this on purpose. In this case, it wanted all of those people to interpret the owl the way they interpreted it, and for them to be laughed at by the skeptics when they said, you've just looked at an owl. That is part of the deception.
Right.
So every time you go to try and tell people what has happened to you, there is something added to the story that makes it feel unbelievable to everybody else around them. It isolates them and almost causes them to be, it's more than a point of ridicule. It singles them out as the villager, as the farmer said earlier, the lunatic in the village, because he was forced to change his story because he thought that was too mad. He changed his story. He's automatically lying. Therefore, you have a whole load of problems come out of that. And so when people say, oh, it's a helicopter, he's not able to easily defend that without going back and changing his story. You see where he's coming from here. But you're forcing people into a lie.
If you follow that logic, though, would it not be better for this trickster spirit, whatever we want to call it? Let's take this example. You've got 7 people, I think you said, who saw this thing. Wouldn't it make more sense if your aim was to get that ridicule, to do that trick, to make 6 of them see an owl and 1 of them see the creature, or 50-50?
Yeah.
Rather than have some investigator come in and go, well, it was probably an owl and it was the tree line and it was, Venus, whatever it is. That's the bit I don't quite understand. It's because you said earlier, a lot of these are people on their own. I know that last one wasn't, but wouldn't it be better for the guy on his own, the police guy even, to go, oh my God, this is what I saw, and everybody else around him to go, no, it was a helicopter. That would be more effective, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, it would. And I've got a case that you've spoken about coming up where we can discuss that a little bit more. But yes, there might be a reason why it doesn't do that, that we can't really put our finger on. But yes, but I think you're thinking about it logically, and you have to think about it logically, because if you don't, what have you got?
It's also, there's a bit of me, the skeptic bit of me, that goes, it's a handy thing to say, though, isn't it? Even the one that looks like an owl is actually paranormal.
It is.
You could never debunk anything on that scenario, could you?
No, but what he's saying is that there's an element of glamorization here, because there would be no, in inverted commas, fun for whatever is causing this, the daemons.
Right.
If they all came down and went, that's all right, guys, it was an owl and a fireball, everybody.
Yeah.
There is nothing for you to perpetuate the myth about. If the fairies just made people lose their memory of seeing them, then again, there'd be no fun in that. They want people to go back and tell stories about the fairies because that's what they exist for. They exist to create these stories. That's that's the ultimate conclusion to this.
The other thing I'm thinking on that would make sense in terms of UFO lore, of why don't they land on the White House lawn? Because where's the fun in that?
Absolutely, absolutely right. Yeah. And we're assuming that the part of you that says why don't they land on the White House lawn would suggest that there is a logical reason for them being here. Yeah, they turn up on the White House. They go, we come from Zeta Reticuli. Sorry, everybody. We're now announcing ourselves. who wants to be part of the Intergalactic Federation? And everybody goes, yay. And
my new theory based on this is all these visitations are basically alien teenagers on spring break.
Well, you said it before, and there's literally no reason why that wouldn't be true.
Yeah.
You remind me of, in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, there's an immortal character called Wowbagger.
Right.
And because he is so bored, he makes it his personal mission to insult everybody in the galaxy in alphabetical order, one at a time. Because he can. So he ends up going up and insulting Arthur Dent. Arthur Dent has no reason why he's been insulted.
Oh, that's brilliant.
But it's just because of the boredom of immortal Wowbagger.
Right.
And that idea is persistent, like, because we have no frame of reference for the daemons that are causing this. That might literally be, you know, it could be something as simple as that. We are immortal, we are bored, let's play with these humans because we got these bits of magic. There's another story here that he brings up in the book to sort of point out that these things aren't always intimidating and nasty, and I think we kind of know that, but there's a story about a clergyman's widow in London, and this is about 1860. Sitting on a bench in Regent's Park in real pain from an injured foot, wondering how on earth she's going to get home. A tiny man in green appears beside her, looks at her with a kindly face and says, "Go home. We promise that your foot shall not be in pain tonight." And then he goes. He just literally, like Homer, disappears back into the hedge.
Wow.
And then she realises the pain is gone.
Wow.
And she walks home, sleeps like a child. It's the same species, Harper insists, as the thing on the hill in West Virginia.
Yeah.
The daemons are not good and they're not evil. They are other. They're older than our categories. And the great mistake, the mistake that gets people hurt in the folklore, is to think that you understand them. And I think this is where he reaches a bit of more of a sort of a conclusion that we can not necessarily hang our hat on, but that we can make a bit more sense of. So he says the person that saw this most clearly was Carl Jung, who at the very end of his life in 1959 wrote a book about flying saucers.
Yep.
And everyone thinks he either debunked or endorsed them, but actually he did neither, and that's kind of the point.
And we've talked before, there's real interpretation of what he means by a kind of collective consciousness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where he's going with this.
You're right.
Jung said, "I don't know if these things are physically real, and it doesn't matter for what I'm about to tell you. Because whether or not there's a metal in the sky, there is an undeniable something happening in the human soul."
Yeah.
Now, he called it a visionary rumour. Something is seen, he said, but it isn't known what. And he noticed that the discs were round, circles. Mandela's, the ancient symbol of wholeness, of the self-made whole, was the same. In an age terrified of the atom bomb and split down the middle by the Cold War, Jung said, the collective mind is throwing symbols of wholeness and salvation up into the sky. Now, that is kind of a very deep and personal interpretation.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I completely agree with that, but he's kind of onto the same point as the author of this book.
I'm just thinking of the saucers then, are Jungian. Does that mean the cigar-shaped ones are Freudian?
Well, possibly. The other thing he says about Jung, and I think you brought this up when you spoke about him, is he dreamed that he saw a UFO, and he realised in the dream that he had it backwards. We always think, he wrote, that the UFOs are projections of ours.
Yeah.
Now it turns out that we are their projections. I am projected by the flying saucer.
Ah, okay.
And then he said, and this is the great question, but who, Jung wrote, manipulates the apparatus?
Well, that's making me think of simulated reality. Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Now, there's another story I have to tell you to kind of pull some of this together. We're in County Derry in Ireland, 1928, and a man named Dr. Martin is out trout fishing in his lovely shoes. along a river, and he sees paddling through the shallows towards him a huge black animal. It's not a dog, it's far too big, and it's too wrong. As it draws level with him, this thing turns its head and looks at him. And Mr. Martin said it looked at him with the most human intelligence, and it drew back its lips and bared its teeth. Not quite a snarl rather. It was a jeering grin.
Right.
And its eyes, he said, were alive like coals. So he means that they carried a coldness, but they were definitely there. He was so shaken, he ran back and got a shotgun. He came back and there was nothing. And crucially, nobody else had seen a thing. Now, just before I go on with this, if you follow, for example, Small Town Monsters on YouTube, you will see that the witness accounts of wolfmen in America, it's very similar. They talk about this intelligence that they see in the eyes. There was one account that I was... just in case you don't know, Small Town Monsters, they make films about people who have encountered lots of strange cryptids. One of them that they keep going back to is obviously the Wolfman, and they're quite obsessed with the Land Between the Lakes that we've spoken about, because there's some good Wolfman and Dogman stories coming from there. Yeah. But the witnesses often talk about if they make eye contact with this thing, there's an intelligence there that regards them as lowly as an ant. They use those exact words, and this is kind of what he's saying here. It's not like the kind of intelligence that you see from perhaps a predator that we would know, like I don't know, like a standard wolf or a lion, and you see in its eyes it's working out how it can catch you to eat you because it's hungry. That isn't that. This is a malevolence which is otherworldly, but it's full of intelligence. Anyway, just going back to Mr. Martin, and not Dr. Martin.
Lovely shoe.
He's looking through a set of cigarette cards.
I just got your shoes joke. Sorry, I didn't get it at the time.
Sorry,
delayed reaction. Got it.
And these were the little collectible pictures that they used to put in the cigarette packets. I'm sure you'd have seen them. He turns one over, and there's a painting of a being called a pullapucker, which in Irish means the pool of the pucker. The pucker, which is a great black shape-shifting fairy beast of Ireland, and the animal in the painting is the animal from the river. Exactly. Yeah. And when he asks around, he finds locals who've been seeing it for 50 years, always at twilight, always near the bridge. This is the phenomena that sometimes the English call the black dog, and it's everywhere. In Norfolk, it's Black Shuck, and a Coast Guard named David Grant watched one trotting along Gorleston Beach in 1972. This big black dog running, stopping as if it was looking for something, and then vanishing in front of him. In Missouri, hunters reportedly threw an axe at an 8-foot black dog, and the axe passed through it and struck the tree behind. In Nova Scotia, a man who'd had a few drinks turned to confront a thing that was padding behind him, and it went for his throat. And afterwards he said, "It looked like a black dog, but when it got me by the throat, it seems more like a person." Now, that is quite terrifying.
That is terrifying.
Let's make this a little more modern, because what I'm doing is sweeping up things which are kind of supporting some of the story here from his book.
Yeah.
In 1983, on Exmoor, which is in the west of England, farmers started finding sheep dead, not scattered, they'd been slaughtered, killed with precision that didn't fit any local predator. Some of the wounds looked like claw marks. A cat retracts its claws when it walks, so what leaves claw marks in the mud around the sheep? They called it the Exmoor Beast, and the panic got so bad that the British government sent in Royal Marines, actual Royal Marines with night vision sights, deployed across the moor to hunt for, well, they were told they were hunting for perhaps an escaped big cat.
Right, like a zoo animal.
Yeah, but it's terribly Conan Doyle-y.
Yeah,
and really they're going after, it's a phantom, basically, in the old sense of the word.
Yeah.
And the thing is, they saw it more than once. The Marines with the best optics available reported seeing a large, dark, cat-like animal, but it evaded every single one of them. And then, as suddenly as it started, the killings just stopped. There was no zoo, no circus, no private collection anywhere in the country that said that they were missing an animal. And believe me, they did look.
Yeah.
It's the same phenomena, Harper says. The black dog, the alien big cat, and the ghostly grinning puka. The creature is almost an animal. It's real enough to kill a sheep, to leave a track, to register in the Marine's night sight, then to walk through a barbed wire fence as if it were mist, which is an actual quote from one of the soldiers who were out looking for it, and then vanish into thin air, which is exactly what one of them did in front of a woman named Mrs. Lister and her fiancé in 1964. It hopped towards the car, passed clean through a triple-strand barbed wire fence again without touching it, got down on all fours, and then disappeared. And then there's the big one, the hairy man in the woods, the wood ape, whatever you want to call it. In America, it's the Bigfoot, obviously, Sasquatch, Yowie, all over. Yeah. And the standard debate about him is entirely about biology. Is there or is there not an undiscovered great ape living in the forests of Pacific Northwest? But Harper says, if you read the actual encounters, you will notice the same impossible thing keeps happening. People shoot at Bigfoot constantly, sometimes at point-blank range, and nothing happens. Uniontown in Pennsylvania in 1974, a woman gets out on her porch with a shotgun, and a 7-foot creature raises both its arms. She fires into its midriff, and there is a brilliant flash of light, and the creature simply vanishes. No body, no blood, no trace. Oregon, 1957, a hunter named Gary Jonas shoots a deer. Before he can get it in, a 9-foot hairy creature strides out of the trees, bends down, picks up his deer, and carries it off under one arm, like he's carrying a rolled-up rug. He's furious. Gary empties his rifle into the back of this thing. Doesn't even flinch. He just makes a strange whistling noise and keeps walking towards the trees. These do not read like reports of an animal. They read like reports of a puka. They read like reports of the black shuck, of something that borrows the shape of something that is in flesh but does not obey the rules of the flesh. I said, not always are these things bad, and this is what makes the phenomena more perplexing. If we go to Watova in Oklahoma in 1974, we got the Lee family. For weeks, they've been having Bigfoot sightings around the farm, and at first they were terrified. But the thing didn't hurt anyone. It just kept turning up. And slowly over those weeks, the fear wore off. And then they kind of became fond of having this thing around. It's like a big pet that kind of visits. Right. And it started to play a game. Every day, the creature would leave a feed pail sitting in front of the barn. The Lees would hide the pail, and the next day, the pail would be back in front of the barn. They'd hide it again, and it would come back over and over.
Playing hide and seek with a Bigfoot. Love it.
One day, they said they even heard this thing laugh from the woods.
Wow.
And it was fine. It was almost sweet, right up until it stopped playing. When they started ignoring it, it turned difficult. It thrashed around the barn. It took a neighbour's chicken, and eventually some deputies came out and fired shots at it. After that, it left, but Mrs. Lee said one day while she was in the shower, she heard a single thump on the wall of the house. A curiously poignant thump, she called it, like a goodbye. Harper's reading of that story is the moral centre, really, of everything I've been talking about. He says the Lees did the one right thing at first without knowing it. They didn't try to capture it. They didn't try to explain it. They just kept it company.
Right.
And then they made the modern mistake. They tried to make it go away. They ignored it. They shot at it. And it left. It was wounded, but it wasn't wounded in the body. It was upset. It is
emotionally hurt.
Yes, yeah. It didn't want you to do that. And he points out daemons do not literally need feeding, they need heeding. As soon as you acknowledge these things, they start playing nice and they start, working alongside humans. They don't want food, they want attention. They want a whole civilization of humans has decided to stop acknowledging them, and that has really upset them. So think about that, what that means for where they have to go and how loud they have to be seen. That's that's his point here, is like they're making a noise to point out that they exist. And he brings up this case which you spoke about, Fatima, 1917.
Yeah.
We know the story well. 3 shepherd children, Lucia, Jacinta. They had said that the lady, Virgin Mary had been appearing to them in a field. A lady of light, they called it. Nobody believed them, but the children said something specific would happen, and on the 13th of October, the lady would perform a miracle, so everyone would believe. You do not, as a child, want to promise a public miracle on a fixed date. He points that out. It's a very bold move.
Yeah.
But everybody came, and estimates run from between 40 to 100,000 people. I think we settle on 70,000. Yeah. Trudging out into a muddy field in the cold rain. There's believers, skeptics, newspaper reporters, the whole lot. And then around noon, the rain stopped, the clouds opened, and the crowd looked up at the sun. And as we know very well from this story, the sun was wrong. You could look straight at it, and it had become a dull silver disc that you could stare at without having any pain in your eye. Then it began to spin. It turned on itself like a great wheel of fire. It threw off shafts of coloured light, some of it violet and green. That swept across the field and stained the upturned faces of the crowd. It was bouncing off their faces. And then after some minutes of this, the sun appeared to tremble, shudder loose, and to plunge, to come zigzagging out of the sky towards the earth. And 70,000 people believed they were about to die. They screamed, they fell on their knees in their mud, they begged forgiveness. And then it stopped. The sun went back, the people staggered up, found that their clothes were soaked by hours of rain. The mud was deep in the field. They were suddenly dry. And the skeptics say, look, you can't stare at the sun. If tens of thousands of people, primed for a miracle by months of anticipation, all fix their eyes on the sun at once, you will get mass retinal after images. You get optical effects from thin clouds and atmospheric dust. You get the raw power of suggestion running through a crowd like electricity. We spoke about this before. Yeah. There was a skeptic named Benjamin Radford, and he said it's hard to argue with the sun did not actually move. We know this, he says, because everybody on Earth is under the same sun. And if our nearest star had genuinely started doing gymnastics, a few billion other people would have mentioned it. Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. And yet, here is what the skeptical account cannot quite dissolve and why the story survives. It was reported by the hostile press, and a lead reporter for the big Lisbon paper named Avelino de Almeida, who had come to mock, he wrote that the sun trembled, that the sun danced, using the very same phrases that the people around him were using. And the people who came to laugh went home and wrote it down as though it were real. Something happened in that field that overrode what people wanted to believe, and whether it happened in the sky or happened in the minds of all of those people, Harper argues that the second option is not any miraculous than the first. It's arguably more that something had changed the perception in the minds of those people. So he's saying that it is a miracle, even though the sun didn't dance. And when we say this, something happened, he again puts it down to the force, the daemons wanting to be heard, wanting to be believed, and using religion to sort of insert themselves into the conversation again. Yeah. There's the way the book comes to a conclusion is a couple of other stories that kind of I think are worth mentioning. There's a man named Tom Henn. And Henn was Patrick Harper's own tutor at Cambridge. He was a literary scholar and completely sober and described as a serious man. Henn told the story of being on a train to Manchester years earlier with another passenger in the compartment. And the two of them heard at the same time a sound outside the train, a keening, an unearthly wail of a woman. They were so certain it was real, so certain that a woman had fallen onto the tracks. They pulled the emergency cord on the train and they got off to search with some members of the carriage who were on there with them. Nothing. There was nobody. And Tom Henn later learned that at that very hour, his elder brother had died in the family's old home in Ireland. Now, he believed that he'd experienced a banshee. Right. The woman of the fairy hill. In Irish tradition, certain old families have one attached to them when death is coming. Lady Gregory collected an account where a whole card game of 7 people saw a woman in white outside the window. But one old man, Mr. King, heard her cry coming from a long way off and then from herself. It was so mournful it stayed with him, and days later the head of the family took off to bed and died. They put that down to a banshee, of course.
Right, yeah.
On the 12th of October 1975 in Stanbridge in Bedfordshire, England, a 26-year-old carpet fitter named Roy Fulton is driving home from a darts match in the pub. His headlights pick out a figure ahead, thumbing a lift. A young man, pale face, a bit long in the face. Dark trousers, dark jumper, white-coloured shirt underneath. Roy's a decent bloke. He stops. The young man opens the door, gets into the passenger seat, says nothing, just points at the road. So Roy drives. A few minutes go by in silence. And Roy, being sociable, reaches down for a pack of cigarettes to offer his passenger one. I leant forward and picked up the pack of cigarettes, turned around to offer the lad one, and that man was not sitting there. The moving car, the door shut, the seat is empty. Roy slammed on the interior light, checked the back seat, empty. He drove on, shaking, ashen face, straight to his local pub, the Glider. Burst in, told the landlord and everybody there, and he was, by every account, genuinely terrified. Now, you know what I'm going to say. The Vanishing Hitchhiker is probably the one of the single most widespread pieces of modern folklore.
Yeah.
There are versions in Sweden, South Africa, Korea, America. The phantom passenger who disappears from the moving vehicle is a legend. It's now people report it on YouTube. But here is Harper's point. Roy Fulton lived it. He didn't read it in a book and repeat it. As far as anybody can tell, he never heard the legend. He just drove home from darts one night and the legend happened to him firsthand. The folklore didn't stay folklore. He says he got into his car. Those are the words he uses.
Right.
And Harper says, for us to understand this, the way that I can put it is folklore is never literally true, but it may always be fundamentally true. The Vanishing Hitchhiker isn't a fact, it's a form, a shape the other world likes to take. And every so often it puts the shape on, climbs into someone's passenger seat and does the thing. What he says is, again, it's asking to be seen, right? It's just asking, please acknowledge that this happens, because you can't pass on the folklore if you haven't seen it. So it's making it happen.
So is he saying it chooses to do that because it's almost a folklore that we like, or a story, or a, you know what I mean? Because it's you would mix it up, wouldn't you? But there seems to be a consistency in terms of the cryptid, in terms of this folklore. Do you know what I'm getting at? It seems to like certain themes if we go with what he's saying, and there must be a reason for that.
Well, he says it's because the story is tellable. So the reason why it exists in all of those different parts of the world is because the story is so tellable. It means something to somebody else.
So if that thing was listening to a back catalogue, and we always say, God, it's just such the perfect kind of cinematic story, that thing would say, well, yeah, that's why I picked it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, he goes, it's worth, I don't want to sort of labour the point, but he does make the point of sometimes the phenomena tries to leave something with you. So we spoke about the case of the pancakes, and he does actually mention that.
Right.
I won't go into the full details, but it was 1961, and it's a chicken farmer. He gets asked by some residents of a Silver Craft whether they can have some water, and he notices that they're cooking inside and they're making pancakes. They offer him a pancake. He takes one. He takes the pancakes to a lab for them to be investigated, and all that comes back is flour, sugar, fat, ordinary, perfectly traditional earthly pancakes, nothing exotic, nothing from beyond. Joe himself actually tasted one and gave the single greatest review in the history of ufology. He said it tasted like cardboard. So ordinary food, right? Case closed. Sad, sincere old man, probably had a vivid waking dream.
Right. and made
Harper
crap
says,
pancakes.
Yes, but you've missed the entire point, because in fairy lore for 1,000 years, this is exactly what fairy food does. It looks like a feast, turns out to be leaves and dust. It's called fairy gold, the coins that turn to dead leaves in your pocket by morning. He got the oldest gift in the world. He just came in a saucer instead of on a hillside.
Yeah.
There's a great case that he does bring up of, I love fairy artifacts. Fairies are known for leaving clothing behind. In Ireland in 1938, a farm labourer found a shoe on a remote sheep track. Single black gentleman's shoe, beautifully made in the style of the previous century, hand-stitched with tiny eyelets.
I've seen photos of this. We've done this a long time ago. It's amazing, that photo.
Under 3 inches, too small for a doll.
Yeah.
And it has been examined by scientists at Harvard. It was passed down through the family for generations. And this impossible, perfect little...
It is perfect.
Shoe, Harper says is a red herring, a thing the daemons leave behind precisely to drive the literal-minded insane.
Right.
And sometimes the gift is real and you get to keep it, but only if you don't get greedy. There's a story he tells about himself as a boy. He desperately wanted a fishing rod as a child, and he was short. I think it was like half a crown, he says. And he was mooching around outside, idly pulling up weeds from the grass verge, wishing the way that children wish with their whole bodies. And under the root of one weed, he found a coin, a half crown. It was green with age, and it was as if, he said, it felt like it had been waiting for me. Yeah. As years go by and he's grown up, reading the folklorist Lady Gregory, he found the same story, an old Irish account of a girl who pulled up a tuft of grass and found beneath it a whole mound of half crowns. She filled her apron with them, and she called out to her friend to come and see. The instant the friend arrived, all the coins in the hole vanished, but the ones in her apron she got to keep. They existed.
Right.
And that's the rule, he said. The gift is real as long as you receive it quietly and privately and don't try to prove it. The moment you call the witness over, the moment you demand it hold still for the laboratory, it turns back into leaves.
Right.
And there's one great example that sort of shows this, I think. There's a very famous example that he gives, which is Joseph Smith. New York, the 1920s, Joseph Smith, who is, of course, the founder of Mormonism, he says he sees a robed, glowing figure floating, not standing, that appeared to him and told him where a box was buried. And years later, he digs it up, and inside is a set of golden plates engraved with strange symbols, and 11 of his neighbours signed sworn statements that they too had seen the plates. Smith translates them, and the translation is the Book of Mormon, and there are millions of people alive today whose entire spiritual world rests on those plates. Now, the plates, once the work was done, they were gone, taken back. Smith said, by the messenger, returned to the other world. There is no plate in a museum. There is never going to be one. And he says this is demonic evidence. It was presented, again, to insert themselves into a established religion and point out that they were there.
Evidence is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that.
Evidence is doing a whole of
almost the opposite of evidence, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I think so. But if we're to go with the rest of the stories, that's kind of what he's saying.
And I'm not trying to be
you're not
difficult, but it is quite convenient. All of this, is it not?
Oh, no, it is. But I think, that one might be a long bow to draw.
What I did like about what you were just saying in the last couple of minutes is, again, what we say on the podcast a lot of time. We come across stories and go, well, it was probably that, and it was probably that. A bit like the one we did last week with the mileometer on the car going back to 666.
Yes.
You kind of go, it's probably just somebody freaking you out. But that bit of it, you go, that is a bit odd. And that would fit in to the law that you're talking about, wouldn't it? To drive us mad. Literally to drive us mad of like, well, I did a whole episode on 666. My conclusion was, it's just people freaking themselves out, apart from that story, which is a bit weird. So that's the bit that drives you mad, right? That's what they would want if you believe his interpretation of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely right. And, when we go back to that question of who manipulates the apparatus, who is projecting whom, that's the question really in all of this. And there isn't really any answer to it apart from the practical advice for how to walk through a world that has like this other world leaking into it. And he makes up his own little version of an Irish fairy tale, because he says the hero who wins is never the strong brother who charges in to conquer the other world by force. That one always fails. The one who wins is the youngest foolish one, who is courteous, who is kind to the beggar, who is kind to the woman and the talking fox, who keeps the sense of humour and is humble enough to know he'll never understand and stops trying to. And he points out there's a very old story from rural Ireland that was passed to him by what he described as a shaman. And he says in the story, there is a shaman who was brought in to try and work out why all these cattle are being killed. And he ends up tracing it back to a terrible hag who rules the animals. And everybody else had tried to fight this hag, but the shaman doesn't. He goes to the bottom of the well where she lives, and he simply gently combs the tangles out of her filthy, matted hair. With that, she turns to him and says, "Thank you, I will stop killing the cattle. I just wanted somebody to help." And this is, he says, the allegory of all of this. That's how you win, not with a weapon, but with attention and with care and with respect for a thing that you cannot understand. Again, he uses that phrase, they don't need feeding, they need heeding. And when I said about the word daemon, it got confused with demonic, because that's what the church wanted you to believe, because obviously demonic carries a lot of connotations with it. Daemon, and we've used that with the writings of Philip K. Dick have used that, and Cheating the Ferryman, Philip, his name will come to me in a minute, but this use of the word daemon is used by various other people, and in some cases it's used to describe in Cheating the Ferryman, it is used to describe the fact that humans are being driven by a force that we don't understand, and he calls that the daemon. And in this case, we're using the word daemon to describe a force that we don't fully understand, and it's just a slight move away to demon, and that is when you start you go into religion and say you shouldn't be messing with these things, so you should ignore them and banish them. And he points out, if you start challenging these things head on, they are going to do what they have been doing, which is sort of fighting fire with fire, right, and making our world more challenging to live in because we haven't accepted them. When we talk about people who seem to have a respect for, either ancestors and the world around them, and I guess the traditional image might be a Native American person, he says that is the way to be, because eventually we will start receiving wisdom from these things and we will live in harmony with them. They're part of our world, and we have just become so taken away from them by our own ways of living that we've forgotten what they were. And when we point and laugh, they come after us. But when we work with them, better things happen. But his overall conclusion is all of these things are the same thing. It's the same phenomena. It just manifests differently. And that was what drew me into this. And kind of I've always felt like a fairy encounter feels like a UFO encounter, but he's saying, it's the whole gamut of everything.
So it's a real overarching theory.
It's a real overarching theory. He hasn't he doesn't really cover ghosts and phantoms, but he doesn't sort of say why your Aunt Ethel appears in the kitchen, right, wanting you to find her watch that was buried under a tree. But what it does do, inadvertently, though he doesn't mention it, it does kind of explain Jots.
Right.
in a way.
Yes.
So what he's describing there about pulling the grass up and finding the coin, that is essentially sort of a jot. It's not quite, because he didn't have the money in the first place. He hadn't lost it.
Yeah.
But it is sort of a jot. And I really like that idea. Now, the frustrating thing is it doesn't take us any closer to knowing what it is, but it does take us closer to perhaps an interpretation of why it behaves the way it does.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting. Really interesting. And I like that bit about, laughing at it, kind of, demonizing it is almost like kicking the hornet's nest rather than just leaving it, because it's not disturbing you.
That's right.
A different way. That's
right. You have to sort of ask yourself when those Marines are out trying to find what appears to be a big cat, but is manifesting itself in a very peculiar paranormal way. It could presumably have taken a chance to have mauled one of them like it was mauling the sheep. But it didn't, because it was now receiving attention.
Right. I
don't know what to make of that. But if you go back to some of the stories that we've told recently, the one that kept going through my mind, that we kept saying halfway through, what is the point of this? The tooth fairy. We said the only reason it would do it is to get attention. Well, that is the whole premise of this.
I was thinking the tooth fairy while you were doing the app. Yeah.
Well, that one, the bit where it's wearing a ridiculous blonde wig. Yeah. It just makes sense with this.
Yeah.
So I don't know, and I wonder whether. So we both had something of a coincidence happen to us this week. So he talks about this clustering of events.
Yeah. I yes, absolutely. And just so you guys know, this came about because I don't know why I did, actually. I sent you a WhatsApp message saying, "Oh, you never guess what's happened to me." And what happened to me kind of happened to you on the same day. I'm wondering if we should have a chat about that in the extra scoop, actually.
Yeah, okay.
Just not necessarily as some big teaser to get people there. It's just time-wise, I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And I've got a couple more stories from that book which show a slightly different side. It's still the same theses, but some very interesting tales which just add a little bit more colour around the edges of what's going on.
Yeah, so come and join us at Ben and Peter's Extra Scoop, a Patreon exclusive. Patreon.com/TQM pod. I think the first few minutes are you can access without being a Patreon subscriber, if I believe it rightly. So we'll do, just so you don't think we're using our kind of weird thing that happened to us on Thursday independently as some way of pushing you over there. I think if you go there, you'll be able to hear that bit at least. We'll do it for top of the show.
No snoring dog this week.
No snoring dog this week. That was really good. I mean, in a way, I like the fact he's not kind of coming to a big conclusion about what these things are. He's just trying to put the behaviour together. Though, again, skeptic side, kind of conveniently, but really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, again, another bit of a coincidence. I am going to be covering stories of UFO encounters by policemen and women.
Lovely. I'm looking forward to that. They're some of the most intriguing paranormal and police, I find.
Well, interestingly, it's a new book that's been put together by a serving police officer.
Well, lovely.
And he's managed to interview colleagues who've not wanted to talk about this stuff.
Ah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So, unreported tales.
Indeed.
Excellent. I look forward to that one next week.
Good. All right. Well, hopefully come and join us at the X Group. If not, we will see you next week. Thanks, Ben, and thanks all you for listening.
Bo Selector. See you then.
Bye.
Are you the quantum mechanics?